Hey everybody, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program RP-0. When we last left off, Engineer Laura Douglas was sliding frictionlessly down a hill, trying to get back to the disposal unit rover, and it was not going very well. We actually flew far enough away from the rover to where we couldn't just quick change between the two, and all this tumbling is just silly. Like, we should have been able to slide gracefully down the hill, but any step causes a tumble. We could use our EVA pack, but unfortunately, the stuff in that she's carrying makes it a little hard for her to make a soft touchdown. No solution was proving to work out very well, but I figured jumping was a little better because it scratches up the spacesuit a little less. And if you get the landing with a good relative speed, you actually don't roll down the hill. And then it occurs to me that the rover itself is actually still sliding down the hill fairly quickly, making it really hard to get closer when it's running away from you. So we took the cartwheel approach, and finally, I think the rover came to a little bit of a rest. It looks like it is not moving, so if we can get just a couple dozen meters closer, we should be able to switch to it using the bracket key and maybe get itself upright and have the rover come pick up our engineer instead of our engineer putting some serious dents in this helmet trying to catch up with it. And nope, magically it has started sliding down the hill again. Now 350 meters away instead of the almost 200 that we were down to before. Figures. It looks like it has stopped again, so I just assume that by the time we get a little closer to it, it will be moving again. But now we are within 100 meters. Trying to drop stuff from the inventory just causes us to completely lose control and go sideways. Interesting. But we are able to switch to the rover finally. And, oh yeah, it's moving at about 15 meters per second, sliding effortlessly down a dusty hill. But we should take this as an opportunity to maybe put it on its wheels, get the brakes engaged so that we can bring this stupid ordeal to an end. So first we'll try using just the arm, but this is why I put those antennas on the side. It's because the arm is just not quite long enough to push it over on its wheels entirely. But I was kind of hoping that with the slide, and if we could get ourselves angled down the hill a little bit, maybe it would help. When that fails, we'll just activate the antenna. Yeah, that worked real well. The physics of this just amaze me. I don't understand how any of this spin happens most of the time, but you know, hey, nothing has broken off, and that's what really matters, I guess. So, there, the rover is stopped. I think we are most of the way down this stupid hill. So we will just try to use the rover's arm to hopefully flip ourselves back over on our wheels and not just roll around a bit and end up on our back. That worked real well. Trying to upright a downed rover with Infernal Robotics is always a very, very interesting endeavor, but it looks like finally we get it wheels side down, and we'll lock the brakes, and somehow that makes us just torque forward and balance it on the antenna. But, you know, hey, people train for a very long time to do this on skateboards, and we can just do it effortlessly on the moon. Alright, the rover is upright, wheels side down. We'll check the brakes and stow our robotic arm, and then it is time to go pick up our trusty engineer, who is 1.3 kilometers up the hill. Fantastic. Which, of course, means that we're going to have to drive back down the hill when it comes time later. But so long as we kind of keep it a little sideways, like, I don't know, not really sidewindering, but a little sideways will be fine. Quick check on the map view. It does not look like there are any super treacherous stupid hills in front of us, or frictionless mountains for that part. So we will make sure that our life support is unlocked, I guess, and then reset our automated rover driving program. Make sure the speed is set to a reasonable level, get up to 3 times time warp acceleration, and then start venturing up the next hill. Now this is actually a much more moderate hill, but as a precautionary measure, we will be slowing it down just a little bit as we come to the crest of the hill, so as to not go completely airborne, and then on the way back down, we can go ahead and return to our normal cruising speed of 14 meters per second before I can really just set the camera at a nice off angle here and let the drive just do itself. This is how Mech Jeb is supposed to work for these long rover drives, but every now and again it's nice to come back, double check your waypoint, maybe hit the brakes for a while, take a quick save, because Kerbal Space Program doesn't like to run for 6 to 8 hours at a time in one go. Just a quick check of our current destination, and to make sure that we are in fact going to get to the biome that we need. We have 2 of them scheduled for this trip, Moon's Highlands and the Lunar Seas. Now the Lunar Seas we have actually landed in before. I think that was our first automated moon landing was in the Lunar Seas, and then I know we've done a crewed landing there as well, but none of that data has been pushed through a lab before. I don't think we've actually ever been to the Highlands here on the moon with either a probe or a crew, so all of that is going to be nice, fresh, new data, so we'll take 2 copies, one to radio home, and then another set to bring back to the lab for all those free extra sciencey points, except for the stuff that we can't reset, because bringing a scientist along on this just seemed like endangering 2 Kerbals instead of just 1 Kerbal. So we will just we'll take the small penalty on not being able to return a biological sample from both biomes, and also it occurs to me that, well, it doesn't occur to me. Turns out we don't have a core on this rover that can hold science data, which is a big bummer, because Kerbal can only hold 1 crew report and 1 surface sample, even if they're from different biomes, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It seems like you should have the ability to put a different rock in a different pocket, maybe, or write down your crew report on 2 separate sheets of paper. I don't know. I mean, it's 1985, 86 for some reason. And a brief flip ends us wheels up, and we can just continue on without too much effort at all. Lucky I was there for that one. And it looked like every minute of this, it looked like we were about to be there, but we're down to about 13 kilometers before we get to our second waypoint or so. So we're just watching the current biome to see when it's going to change, if it's going to change. I'm sure it will at some point, but as we approach the hill, it will actually change. It seems very odd that we have been in a much higher location. But this is the Lunar Seas. We will hit the brakes and start to run our first batch of experiments. Some of these we don't have yet, so we'll actually be radioing them home. And just double checking to make sure the data goes through. It does not. We need to have one of these antennas active. Run it again. There we go. 32 science added. And most of these we should already have, but anything that we don't, like the surface hydrogen scan, we'll radio a copy home, keep a copy for ourselves, make sure that engineer Laura Douglas puts all that nice data in her pocket, the 1 pocket that she has, I guess. You know, fair enough. I thought that you could do the old trick of transferring data from, like, when you're in the outside of a command pod, you take the data out of the command pod, then you put it back in, and that clears everything that you have. Apparently it deletes it when you do it through this mod, which I can't remember the name of. And she'll plant a flag. Hopefully she'll get a nice promotion for that. I think she's well earned it at this point. We will rerun the experiments for which the data I just deleted, and make sure it all gets transferred over to Laura Douglas, and she can keep all this nice information in her pocket. Any duplicates, of course, will delete themselves, even if we transfer them just to her. And then we'll continue on. lunar seas biome cleared out by this rover, and now it is time to move on to the lunar highlands and hope that we can get lots of nice and interesting data there. A little air off the top of that hill, and seems weird. The lunar seas is on the side of a hill, and the highlands apparently are still 3 kilometers away, so they might be up the opposite hill. It just seems odd to me that the highlands would be lower than the seas. You know, I don't make the biomes, but here we are. Moon's Highlands, just on the other side of a hill on the facing downward slope. Now this is a completely fresh biome, so literally everything we have to run, we can run 2 copies of and transmit it all home first, and then keep an extra copy just for us, because it would be really good to have. Slowly sifting through our entire catalog of experiments and trying to see what it would take to radio home some photographs. And that's just like 2 science, and it's 20,000 MIT, so it takes absolutely forever to transmit that data. Not entirely worth it. But we will take a different crew report, take a surface sample, plant a flag, jump back in the rover, and then get ourselves turned around to head home, which means plotting out a new node. And the interesting problem here is that because our targets are so close together, we can only really target the remnants of the Mr. Coffee, which is now listed as a lunar rover, which for a while had me confused. I thought that maybe, just maybe, it was the old lunar rover that got magically destroyed. Turns out no, that is absolutely not the case. A little air off that little hill again, and we are on our way back home. And I'm sure Laura Douglas is absolutely ecstatic to be at the more than halfway mark of this seemingly ridiculous rover trek. But her and I guess, did not learn from the lessons of these things, as our plotted return course takes us straight back into the path of giant frictionless mountain. Although I was obviously not anywhere near the computer or monitoring this at any point during most of this, as you can tell from the very static camera angle and its very pleasing appearance, instead of me constantly turning it and trying to adjust and relook at dumb things. We actually get just a nice, very fluid motion shot, and there you can see it approaching us just on the other side of this first hill, a giant frictionless mountain that probably should have killed both the rover and Laura a couple of times over when we came over the other side of it, but we did actually make it up one side of it, which was absolutely amazing. And now I was still away from the computer, which is why you really can't automate these drives too much, especially with the kind of lackluster zooming available through map view. But we made it up the hill just a little bit before at some point I came back in and realized, oh yeah, there was this thing that caused a huge problem in the last episode. I should maybe have taken steps to avoid it in this episode. Yeah, that was not to be a thing. The rover got down to about 1 or 2 meters per second coming up the hill. Yeah, about 1 meter per second before I will realize what's going on and try to make some kind of executive decision here. So what we'll do is hit the brakes, delete our waypoint, go out to the map view, and plot ourselves out a few more nodes to go around this hill and then hopefully straight in. I think this was the only one that really caused us a whole lot of problems last time or during the last drive, so it really shouldn't take too much just to avoid this one gigantic frictionless mountain. So we'll just trek on down the side of it and then add probably an extra hour to our journey time here, just to make sure that we don't end up ruining a perfectly good rover, killing a perfectly talented engineer, and spoiling about 8.5, 9 hours of gameplay for the sake of being impatient, which is, I guess, my specialty at this point. I don't know. This went a lot smoother than docking. And with the new waypoints plotted in, I would just come back to check very, very infrequently, as I was quite confident in this rover's ability now to navigate, I don't know, based on my very loose instructions, provided, of course, it didn't flip itself during a turn, but it seemed to have nailed the first one, so it was time for me to go off and do other things. And such, which is really the only reason I could make this episode, is because some of this automation really helped. A quick save and a camera adjustment later, and we'll just amp up the time warping, because it's pretty much just a straight shot to home. I mean, not really straight. It has to turn around the waypoints a little bit, but there was another small hill that we managed to dodge through pure luck, because I did not know it was there. I really should see if you could set these waypoints through the ScanSat. The altimetry map available through there, especially in full screen mode, probably would have made this whole process a whole lot easier, now that I think about it and talk about it out loud a whole lot. So maybe I should look into seeing if that's a thing, because if it is, then this whole process became a whole lot easier. It's just trying to keep Kerbal Space Program from crashing in the middle of a long rover trek really becomes the biggest part of the problem. And now we are almost at the halfway point of our return leg journey. I think we're into the last waypoint or so before the rover will turn itself in to make the straight shot back to Rosalina Memorial Station with all of this super awesome data that will keep the science crew entertained for a good long while. And it is also coming up on time to cycle out this crew. I was really just hoping to have the next crew ready to go by the time this crew could leave. And ready to go, I meant like parked and waiting at Tremonia Station in orbit, ready to come back down. So our total time of not doing research here would be measured in a day or two instead of maybe a couple of weeks, because next crew is not even ready to go up yet. But we'll confront that when we need to. It's not really the biggest problem right now, but this is pretty much the last hill before we come over and can actually see the base. Unfortunately, we're targeting something that's not quite anywhere near it, so I will scrap the targeting and try to retarget Rosalina Memorial Research Center before we crest that final hill into the small crater where the base exists, and then make our last couple of 100 meters to approach the base before Lord Douglas can finally get inside, get this dirty, dented spacesuit off, get a nice hot shower, and a freshly microwaved snack. Well earned for a solid day's work. And you can tell she's a little angry because she just goes ahead and clips the fuel cell sitting right there in the middle. Dunk. No worries. But she's home. We're going to get her inside, collect all this data, get it cataloged, and be done with that for a little while. So that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out. I really do appreciate it, and I will see all of you in the next one. So until then, see you later.